Hi there. I'm Lori. 1 week before our anniversary, I found out my husband was secretly planning to divorce me. Not just that, he was trying to take everything, the accounts, the house, even my name on the paperwork. So I filed first and froze everything. But that was only the beginning. Because what do you do when the person you trusted most not only wants to leave, but wants to ruin you quietly behind your back? And what happens when you find out your entire marriage may have been part of the setup? Friday nights used to feel like home. Not because of anything extravagant, just small, silent comforts. A warm apartment tucked above a quiet street in West Seattle, the faint smell of takeout, and jazz humming low through our speakers. That night was no different. Or at least it wasn't supposed to be. Jerome had picked up dinner from our usual Thai place. He plated it like he always did. Extra basil for me, double rice for him. He made a show of lighting a candle, something he rarely bothered with. "Figured we could do a little vibe tonight," he joked, brushing his fingers down my spine as he passed behind me. I smiled, but something about the way he touched me felt rehearsed. I sat on the couch with my wine glass resting loosely in my hand, watching him from the corner of my eye. The Jerome I knew wasn't exactly Mr. Romance. He showed affection in functional ways, fixed things, paid bills, set the thermostat to my side of comfort. But this version of him? This was a man trying to soften a blow he hadn't delivered yet. "So," he said casually, taking a seat across from me, "I was thinking we should probably, get all our ducks in a row, just in case." "In case of what?" I asked, keeping my voice light. "Well, IRS season's coming," he shrugged. "And with everything going on lately, tax law changes, audits hitting folks left and right, I think we should make a full list. Joint accounts, individual accounts, passwords, backups, emergency contacts. Like a couple should." That made me blink. Jerome didn't talk like that. He hated tax season, hated paperwork, hated even thinking about the IRS unless it involved an automatic withdrawal and silence. "Since when do you care about emergency planning?" I tilted my head, keeping my tone even. He laughed too easily. "Babe, I care about you, and I just want us both protected. One of my guys at the firm got hit hard. Turns out his wife had some offshore stuff she didn't even know about. They both got flagged. Nightmare." My gut twitched. I hadn't done anything wrong. But the way he said it, it was as if he needed me to believe I had. He leaned in, placing a hand over mine. "I trust you, Lori. I do. That's why I want to do this together." I pulled my hand back slightly, not out of anger, but to gather my thoughts. Something about the timing. It was late October, and Jerome never started conversations like this unless there was an underlying motive. I scanned his face, the little twitch at the corner of his mouth when he mentioned protection. His lips were smooth, his tone low and careful. Too careful. The rest of dinner passed in fragments. Him steering the conversation back to Halloween plans and a new show we could binge. Me nodding, chewing, swallowing my suspicion alongside every bite. Later that night, as he showered, I sat at my laptop. I knew better than to confront him head-on. Not yet. I'd seen enough red flags in my life to know when to play dumb and when to prepare. I opened our financial folder, backed up every PDF, every transaction history, every insurance policy into a secure drive under a different name. Then I went into our password manager and changed mine. When I closed the laptop, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired, like I had just planted a seed for something I didn't want to grow, but I knew it would. By the time Jerome slid into bed beside me, damp from the shower, smelling like cedar soap, I was already lying still, my back to him. He draped his arm over me like nothing was wrong, like we were still us. "You warm enough?" he asked softly, brushing a strand of hair from my face. "Yeah," I lied. I kept my breathing even, the way you do when you want someone to believe you're already asleep. But sleep wasn't coming that night. Somewhere deep inside, I already knew. He wasn't just trying to protect me from something. He was trying to set something up. I woke up before the sun did. The room was still, blanketed in soft gray light leaking through the curtains. Jerome was fast asleep, chest rising and falling rhythmically, as if peace belonged entirely to him now. I lay there for a few seconds, blinking at the ceiling, heart steady but alert. The night before hadn't left me. It clung to me like static, in my skin, in my breath. I moved quietly out of bed and padded to the kitchen, needing caffeine and space to think. The condo was silent, except for the low hum of the fridge. As I waited for the coffee to brew, I grabbed my phone from the counter, tapped through a few notifications, and opened my inbox. There it was, an email from an address I didn't recognize. No name, just a string of numbers and letters. Subject line, from someone who's been through it. My finger hovered for a second. Then I opened it. He's meeting with Gibson and Lane Law, 1304 Pine Street. Protect yourself. No greeting, no sign-off, no attachments. Just that single line sitting cold on the screen. I didn't move. My coffee beeped behind me, finished brewing, but I didn't reach for it. Gibson and Lane was a family law firm. I knew that because I once referred a client there after her husband blindsided her with divorce papers and tried to walk away with everything. My throat tightened. Was this it? Was this how it started? An anonymous message in the early morning, just before your life split in two? I didn't have answers, but my instincts were suddenly on fire. I took a screenshot, forwarded it to my secure account, and locked my phone. Later that day, after running through emails and half-heartedly pushing through a few spreadsheets, I texted Noelle to meet me at our co-working space. We met outside on the patio, the kind with heat lamps and two small metal chairs. She looked up from her tablet, surprised. "Hey, you okay?" "I will be," I said, sliding into the seat across from her. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Have you noticed anything off about Jerome lately?" She paused, visibly. Her eyes darted for a split second before she blinked it away. "Lori, I wasn't sure I should say anything," she said carefully. "But last Tuesday after work, I saw him, in the parking lot, with a woman." My stomach clenched. They hugged, and then they kissed. I sat perfectly still. Noelle kept talking. I didn't recognize her, but she looked familiar, polished, blonde, like someone who knows she doesn't have to fight for attention. I nodded once. "Thanks for telling me." I didn't ask any follow-ups. I didn't cry. I didn't let the heat rising in my throat come out as anything more than one shallow breath. After Noelle left, I sat there, watching traffic blur down the block. I replayed the last 2 weeks in my head. Jerome's sudden interest in our finances, the cautious tone in his voice, the overcompensation, the affection that came too late. He was getting ready to leave me. That much I knew now. But what made it worse was that he was sure I wouldn't notice, like I was just furniture in his exit plan. When I got home, he was already there, on the couch, scrolling his phone with one leg up, remote in the other hand. ESPN murmured in the background. "Hey," he said, like everything was still normal. "Dinner later?" "Sure," I replied, hanging up my coat. "Just let me finish a few things." In my office, I pulled up my financial software. I didn't want to believe what I believed, but I needed to see everything, again, clean, documented, verified. I created a folder named Contingency Plan. Inside, I started organizing files, account balances, property titles, income history, screenshotted transactions, labeled things in neutral tones, left no trace on the surface. That night, in bed, Jerome watched YouTube clips of some tech podcast. He laughed once or twice, glanced my way, and said, "You're quiet tonight." "I'm just tired," I answered. "Didn't sleep well." He reached over, rubbed my shoulder like he meant it, but I didn't turn to face him. I lay there, watching the shadows shift across our ceiling. He's planning to disappear, I thought, but I'm already 2 steps ahead. By Monday morning, whatever traces of denial I had left were gone. I got ready like I always did, hair pinned, blazer pressed, coffee half sipped, but my mind wasn't in autopilot anymore. It was in investigator mode. Jerome left early, said something about a quick stop by the hardware store on his way to the office. I didn't bother asking for details. After my morning meetings wrapped, I sat at my desk with a salad I had no intention of eating. Instead, I logged into our joint account, not the main one, but the secondary we used for house stuff and vacation planning. I'd already pulled this file last week, but I wanted to run through it again, slower, sharper. The deposits looked normal. It was the withdrawals that didn't. There in the activity log, October 12th, Pay me transfer, $250 to Rochelle G. October 19th. Pay me transfer, $480 to Rochelle G. October 26th. Pay me transfer, $620 to Rochelle G. The amounts weren't massive, not enough to scream theft, but they were consistent, growing, and they all pointed to the same pay me tag, Rochelle Glow. That name. I stared at it for a full minute. My brain looped through every Rochelle I could think of. None matched. But somewhere, the familiarity of it made my throat dry. He wasn't even trying to hide it. I pulled up a separate browser, searched for the handle. What came up was a half-done business page. Personal branding consultant, West Coast based, minimal contact info. One heavily filtered photo of a woman with platinum blonde curls and a smug smile. That was all I needed. The next morning, just before lunch, Noelle buzzed through the intercom. "There's someone here to see you. She says she has a pitch deck and was referred by your husband?" My stomach dropped. "Name?" Rochelle Grant." I didn't answer for a beat. Then, "Send her in." She walked in like she'd done it before. Slim cream blouse tucked into tan trousers, nails glossed, confidence on full blast. She smiled like we were about to talk partnerships, not betrayal. "Hi, Lori. It's so great to finally meet you. Jerome's mentioned your firm could be scaling soon. I wanted to stay ahead of it." She placed a leather-bound folder on my desk like a gift. I kept my expression neutral. "You're in branding?" She nodded. "Strategy, positioning, clean messaging for mid-sized teams. I've worked with real estate groups, financial advisors, even a few political campaigns." Of course she had. Her type always did. Vague resumes, inflated claims, and enough charm to pass a lie detector. I flipped through the portfolio, pretending to read. She talked a lot. I didn't absorb most of it. My eyes were locked on the logo at the top of each page. Glow Strategies, LLC. Fake company. Registered just 4 weeks ago. I knew because I'd already pulled her registration. I set the folder down. "Thanks for stopping by. We're not looking for outside help right now, but I appreciate your time." Her lips twitched. "Of course. If anything changes, you know how to find me." As she turned to leave, she scanned the office. My diplomas, the framed Forbes feature, the team photos. She smirked. Not wide, just enough to sting. "You've built something really solid here," she said. "Must be nice, knowing who's got your back." I didn't respond. I watched her go, then walked to the window and shut the blinds. Back at my desk, I closed my eyes for a beat. I let the fury settle somewhere quiet. Then I opened a new folder in my secure drive, Case File Contingency. Inside, I exported every bank record from the past 6 months, scanned Jerome's linked accounts, and tagged every Rochelle G transaction in red. I wasn't just mad anymore. I was methodical. Her portfolio sat at the edge of my desk, and something about the last page caught my attention. An email domain, Glow Strategies, biz. I typed it into a lookup tool. It was tied to a dummy LLC registered last month. No real business activity, no clients. Just a name and a P.O. box. Sloppy. So incredibly sloppy. "You're laundering love with my money, Jerome," I whispered. "And you think I won't fight back?" I filed everything, renamed the folder again, Phase 1 Rochelle. Rochelle walked out smiling, but she didn't realize she had just walked into a war room. By Thursday, the weather had shifted in Seattle. Gray clouds thickened above the Sound, and the wind bit sharper against my coat as I left work. The city always felt a little more honest when it was damp. That kind of gloom didn't pretend to be anything it wasn't. Neither did I anymore. Dinner that night was roasted chicken, store-bought, and a half glass of Pinot Noir. Jerome came home humming like a man without a care in the world. He kissed the top of my head, complimented the scent in the kitchen, and sat across from me with his usual ease. Halfway through the meal, he reached into his work bag and pulled out a manila folder. "Oh, meant to give you this yesterday," he said. "Just some paperwork my accountant mentioned. End-of-year stuff. You don't have to deal with it tonight." I raised a brow. "You sure?" "Yeah," he shrugged. "Just toss it on your desk. I'll walk you through it later." Then he pivoted to something about a cabin weekend in Leavenworth. Fall colors, hot cider, getting away from emails for a while. I nodded, smiled, made a soft joke about us needing a break. But the moment he turned toward the dishwasher, I slipped the folder into my bag. That night, I didn't open it. I tucked it beside my laptop and instead reread Rochelle's LLC filings twice. The name had stopped stinging, but the stupidity of the plan? That was still fresh. It wasn't until Friday morning, between back-to-back Zooms, that I remembered the folder. I grabbed it without thinking, assuming I'd skim and trash it like most things Jerome forwarded without context. But when I opened it, the breath left my lungs. There it was, a property transfer agreement, page after page of legalese, boilerplate until it wasn't. In one signature block, my name appeared, twice, except I had never signed this. I flipped the page, dated 3 days ago, a clause moving joint assets, including the condo, into Jerome's name alone, under a so-called marital restructure for tax purposes. I stared at the pre-filled signature. It was clean, identical to my digital one. I recognized it because I'd used it 3 years ago when we refinanced the mortgage. The spacing, the slant, it was exact. My fingers went ice cold. This wasn't some tax prep oversight. This was a forged document. And worse, it had been slipped into a file labeled Q4 Budget Notes, part of the stack I reviewed weekly. He was counting on me scanning it quickly, signing it automatically. He was playing on my schedule, my routine. I double-checked the file's metadata. It had been modified on a different laptop. I checked the IP. His office. He didn't even bother masking it. "You absolute coward," I whispered. I sat back in my chair and exhaled slowly. In the reflection of my monitor, I didn't see fear. I saw fire. This wasn't sloppy, it was strategic. He was trying to shift our shared life onto paper he could control, one document at a time. And I was done playing catch-up. That night, I didn't say a word at dinner. Jerome talked about a new hire at his firm, a server crash, and how he might need me to help him prep a few things for an upcoming audit. I just nodded, refilled his water, and made a mental note of every sentence he tried to plant. Before bed, I left the same folder on the kitchen counter, untouched, unbent, and pristine. When he noticed it, he raised an eyebrow. "Did you get a chance to look?" I smiled. "We'll talk soon," he grinned. "Good. Figured we could just knock it out quickly." "Sure," I said, "soon." But my mind was already drafting emails. I would have my lawyer by Monday. I would not only reject the papers, I'd expose them. Inside, my fury wasn't hot anymore. It was glass-sharp, cold, and controlled. He thought he'd win this on paper. But paper can cut. I wasn't ready to confront him yet, but I was done pretending not to see what he was doing. Friday evening arrived like a deep exhale. The condo was quiet, humming with the usual comfort of routine, the faint scent of lemon from a recently cleaned kitchen, the low purr of the dishwasher, and the dim light bouncing off the hardwood floor. I poured myself a glass of Malbec and settled onto the couch, needing a moment that wasn't saturated with legalese and lies. I hadn't decided how I'd move next, but I knew I'd be moving. "Alexa, play Last Request," I said casually, expecting my usual playlist, Miles Davis, Norah Jones, something soft. Instead, the speaker clicked, and Jerome's voice filled the room. "She won't see it coming, trust me. She's never looked at the backup account." My spine stiffened. The wine glass hovered in midair, frozen halfway to my lips. "What did you just say?" I whispered. Not to anyone, just to the air. Jerome's voice continued, casual and low, like he was confiding in someone too comfortable. I didn't breathe. I set the glass down, heart thrumming like a drum against my ribs. "Alexa," I said slowly, "what recordings are saved?" The AI responded with a mechanical sweetness. "There are 3 voice clips saved in the last 7 days. Would you like to hear the most recent?" I hesitated. "Yes." The speaker clicked again, and this time it wasn't Jerome. It was her, Rochelle, laughing. "I told you," she said, voice clear and sharp. "She thinks you're smarter than you are. She's not watching because she thinks she doesn't have to." My skin flushed cold. Rochelle's voice was slick with disdain, like she knew me, like I was some cliché in their game. "She won't fight," Rochelle said. "She's too proud. That's the thing about women like her. They'd rather drown quietly than admit they were wrong. The recording ended, but the silence that followed was louder than any scream. I stood up, legs buzzing like they didn't belong to me. I walked to the window and looked out over the city. Cars blurred beneath streetlights. A couple laughed on the sidewalk. Normalcy carried on just outside my glass. But inside, I was catching fire. I turned back to the room and walked straight to my laptop. Click, Logan, the folder, contingency plan. The checklist I'd kept in my head for weeks became a living, breathing action plan. First, I logged into my bank and began unlinking the accounts tied to Jerome. One by one. Password resets, two-factor codes, authorizations revoked. Second, I opened my calendar and moved up the appointment I'd tentatively booked with Marla, my lawyer. I added a note, urgent, ready to proceed. Third, I pulled up the divorce paperwork template I had saved a year ago when one of my closest friends went through hell with her husband. She'd sent me a copy, just in case. At the time, we laughed about it over brunch. Now, I was filling it out line by line. This wasn't reaction. This was control. The condo door clicked. Jerome walked in, gym bag slung over his shoulder, damp hair from a shower somewhere else, maybe her place. He was wearing his Friday night chill look, old hoodie, basketball shorts, a cocky grin that he probably thought still worked on me. "Hey, babe," he said, tossing his keys in the dish. "Thinking Thai or sushi tonight?" I looked up from my screen, offered him a small, tight smile. "Whichever," I said, standing up slowly. "You know, whichever you think I won't see coming." His eyes flicked to mine. A pause, just enough for the air to thin. He gave a half laugh, like I'd made a joke he didn't quite get. "Sushi it is," he said, walking toward the kitchen. I stayed rooted in place, watching him. This man, who had memorized my favorite red wine, who knew the way I always folded the dish towels in thirds, who used to wake me up on rainy Sundays with jazz playing and pancakes in the kitchen. That man was gone, and the one in front of me had underestimated the woman I had become. I didn't need a confrontation that night. What I needed, what I was already executing, was the exit plan. Because while he was planning betrayal in whispers, I was documenting every one of his moves in broad daylight. And Alexa, sweet accidental witness that she was, had just handed me the proof I didn't even know I needed. He didn't know it, but the countdown had started, and I would move faster than he ever expected. By Monday morning, the Seattle rain had returned, drizzling soft and steady, coating the windows of my office like a veil. It should have been a normal start to the work week. Instead, the atmosphere felt off the second I stepped out of the elevator. People weren't chatting, they were whispering. A junior associate from marketing passed me in the hallway and forced a too-tight smile. A paralegal I'd mentored last year suddenly looked very interested in her coffee when I walked by. The tension wasn't loud, it was heavy. Noelle found me before I could even reach my office. "Hey," she said, glancing over her shoulder before pulling me into the glass-walled conference room. "I didn't want to say anything, but you should know something." I blinked. "Say it." She hesitated, then pushed out a breath. "There's a rumor. It's spreading fast. People are saying you've been funneling client funds into your personal account, that you're about to be investigated." I stared at her. Where is this coming from? Her expression told me what her mouth couldn't. "Jerome," I said quietly. She nodded once, looking pained. "He's been calling people. Quietly. He mentioned the firm might want to distance itself, just in case something goes public." For a moment, I couldn't move, couldn't even blink. Then I did what I always do, straightened my spine, lifted my chin, and swallowed the fire building in my chest. "He's trying to kill me professionally before I can take him down," I muttered. Noelle touched my arm. "What are you going to do?" "Handle it," I said, already turning toward my office. "Exactly the way he hopes I won't." Before noon, I got the call that confirmed it. "Lori," said the voice on the other end, Mr. Fairchild, one of our firm's biggest investors. His tone was cool, professional, but not warm. "I need to ask you something directly." "Of course," I said, heart thumping. "I've heard chatter, about you, about the SEC possibly looking into your accounts. I need to know, do I have a problem here?" My fingers tightened around the phone. No, you don't. But you might want to start asking Jerome Keller what he's been doing with joint accounts, and who's on the other side of those transfers. He paused. That's not an answer, Lori. I understand. You'll have a complete file by end of day, transparent, time-stamped, and legal. And if I were you, I wouldn't make any sudden moves until you've read it. He didn't agree. But he didn't hang up either. By late afternoon, I was in Marla's office downtown, spreading out printed records across her marble table. Bank statements, Rochelle's LLC filings, timeline logs from Alexa, the transfer document Jerome forged with my copied signature. She scanned the pile, face unreadable. Then she looked up, eyes sharp. This isn't just defamation, she said. It's targeted character assassination. He's creating legal smoke so you choke on it before you can light your match. I nodded once. Then we burn it all down. Marla slid a form toward me. We start with a cease and desist. Then we move into a defamation countersuit. If he pushes back, we go nuclear. Fraud, identity misuse, asset manipulation. I signed it without hesitation. Draft the press statement too, I added. He wants to ruin my name before court can hear me. Let's make sure if he leaks anything, I'm not scrambling to mop up his lies. The pen felt steady in my hand. By the time I got home that night, the sky was dark, and my mind was clearer than it had been in weeks. I didn't even take off my coat before opening my laptop and typing one line into a new email. The subject was blank. The message was simple. Your lies won't save you. I hope you have good counsel. I clicked send and shut the lid. No emotion, no rage, just fact. Then I poured a glass of water, lit a single candle on the counter, and looked out over the city. From this height, the traffic below looked organized, flowing in patterns. I wondered if Jerome had thought I'd just spiral, fall apart quietly, take the hit. He didn't realize I'd been quietly rebuilding behind his back. He wanted a war? He'd just gotten one. I was done cleaning up his messes. Now he'd have to survive mine. Friday arrived with a tension so sharp, it felt like walking barefoot across glass. I hadn't slept much the night before. My mind kept cycling through every document, every file, every move Jerome might try next, but not once did I imagine what would come with the morning courier. A knock at the door. I was in my office at the firm, coffee halfway to my lips when Noelle peeked in. Delivery for you, she said, tone flat. From a law firm, Berkowitz something. My stomach didn't drop, it locked. I took the manila envelope, peeled back the flap, and read the cover page. Motion to investigate financial misconduct, filed on behalf of Jerome Keller. The pages that followed were a masterclass in fabricated lies, falsified account statements, edited Excel files showing fake transactions from my name to shell companies. Even timestamps that had clearly been manipulated. I flipped through them fast, heart steady. I wasn't panicked. Not this time. I was insulted. He wasn't trying to win. He was trying to ruin me. By the time I sat across from Marla that afternoon, she'd already reviewed most of it. Her eyes were blazing. This is war, she said, and he's trying to torch your credibility before discovery even begins. I slid the entire packet toward her. Then let's fight like we mean it. We didn't waste time. Marla called in Taryn, a forensic analyst we'd worked with before. Smart, quiet, lethal with metadata. Give me 2 hours, Taryn said, flipping open her laptop. I'll find out how sloppy he really got. Back in my office, I texted Noelle. Reschedule everything after 3 p.m. I'll be in court. When I returned to Marla's conference room, Taryn had her answer, and the grin of someone who'd just caught a rookie mistake. He duplicated your signature from a 2020 refinance agreement, she said. Didn't even flatten the signature layer. It's digitally identical, same vector coordinates. Copy, paste, name changed. Sloppy. I stared at the screen. That refinance doc had sat quietly in a secure folder for years. The fact that he still had access meant he'd been preparing this for months. He thinks I'm just emotional, I said. He forgot who handled our audits. We've got enough, Marla said, snapping her briefcase shut. Let's bury him. By 4, we were standing in the chambers of Judge Elaine Weston at the Seattle courthouse. The room was cold, but the air buzzed with tension. Jerome sat across the aisle with his attorney, a man too tan for Seattle and too smooth for my taste. Jerome didn't look at me when I entered. He didn't have to. His posture said everything. Confident, smug, already counting his win. The hearing began. His lawyer launched into a polished speech about ethical concerns, protecting client assets, and the need for immediate investigation. Then Marla stood, slow and measured. Her tone wasn't loud, but it sliced. We have irrefutable digital evidence that the documents presented by Mr. Keller's counsel were falsified. We have signature overlays, timestamp conflicts, and an expert witness ready to testify that these files were doctored with intent to defame. Judge Weston leaned forward. You're prepared to prove this now? Marla nodded. Taryn was sworn in within 5 minutes. Her testimony was crisp, technical, and devastating. By the end, the courtroom was silent except for the hum of the ceiling fan. The judge turned to Jerome's lawyer. Do you wish to explain this discrepancy? The TAN attorney stammered. Jerome's jaw tightened. This isn't just a false claim, the judge said, voice like granite. This is willful misrepresentation. I'm denying the motion, and I will be reviewing this for possible sanctions. Marla gave me the smallest nod. A silent signal. We had shifted the current. As we left the courtroom, Jerome finally looked at me, just a flicker of something in his eyes. Frustration? Fear? I couldn't tell. But it wasn't victory. I stopped near the exit, tilted my head just slightly, and said the words I'd waited years to earn. You should have learned by now. I don't lose. He didn't respond. He couldn't. And the worst part for him wasn't losing. It was realizing I was the one pulling strings now. Friday morning arrived like the last page of a chapter I'd long stopped reading. The clouds hung low over Seattle, brushing against the courthouse windows like they, too, were waiting for closure. Inside, the atmosphere was quieter than before. No reporters, no camera flashes, just the hum of tension in the air. I wore a gray dress. Neutral, unremarkable, not there to impress, just to end it. Jerome sat at the other end of the courtroom, shoulders hunched, jaw tight. The man who used to breeze into rooms like he owned the air now looked like he couldn't find oxygen. Judge Weston called us to order. Her voice was steady, detached. In the matter of Keller versus Keller, she began, flipping through her notes. This court has reviewed the documentation and expert testimony presented earlier this week. The court finds sufficient evidence of willful misrepresentation, attempted fraud, and defamation against Miss Keller's professional and personal standing. Jerome didn't blink, didn't flinch, maybe because he already knew. The motion is dismissed in full, the judge continued. All financial claims are denied. Mr. Keller is ordered to pay all legal expenses incurred by the respondent. Further, the court finalizes the dissolution of marriage under terms previously submitted by Miss Keller's counsel. And just like that, the storm was still. No shouts, no gavel slam, just an audible exhale from Marla beside me. Rochelle's name wasn't mentioned once, not in evidence, not in ruling. She'd ghosted herself right out of the wreckage, probably traded testimony for immunity, cowardice dressed in legal privilege. After the hearing, Jerome lingered just outside the courtroom. When he saw me pass, he stepped forward. Lori, he said, voice too soft for the tiled hallway. Can we talk? I didn't slow. You had every chance to talk, I said. You chose war instead. His face crumpled for a second, maybe from guilt, maybe just the sting of no audience to applaud him anymore. I didn't stay to figure it out. I walked past the courtroom doors, past the echoes of battles already won, into the drizzle-soaked streets of Seattle where my breath steamed and my name still meant something. Later that afternoon, I stood in the center of my living room, a cardboard box beside me. I packed quietly. Photo frames, the signed marriage license, even the dumb Mr. and Mrs. mugs we got as a joke gift that now felt like cruel foreshadowing. I drove to a donation center and handed the box to a teen in a Seahawks hoodie. Breakup stuff? He asked with a grin. Something like that, I replied, offering a faint smile. Back home, I deleted the folder labeled Contingency Plan. I didn't need it anymore. There were no more plans to make, only clean slates to keep. I opened my banking app and confirmed all joint accounts had been permanently closed. My will was updated, emergency contacts revised. I even reset Alexa's voice profile, because trust doesn't just start over, it starts new. I didn't cry, not because I wasn't sad, but because this was no longer a loss. It was a reclamation. That night, I lit a single white candle in the kitchen, poured a glass of Cabernet, and told Alexa to play Billie Holiday. She obeyed with a soft swell of saxophone and heartbreak. But this time, there were no hidden voices, no betrayal tucked in the pauses. Just me, my music, my space. I curled up on the couch and let the silence fill every inch of my bones. Not empty silence, but a clean one, like air after thunder. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't need to check anything. I was safe in the sound of my own quiet. I didn't need revenge anymore. I had peace. And that was something he'd never touch again. 2 weeks had passed since the trees in Ballard began shedding their brightest hues. The golden leaves that once caught the afternoon sun like flames were now deep reds and rusty browns, some already fallen, others still holding on. It wasn't the kind of transformation anyone talked about. It just happened quietly, like so many other endings, unannounced but inevitable. I parked in front of my mother's house, the one that still lived in my muscle memory. I could have found my way there blindfolded. The modest craftsman had barely changed. Ivy still curled up along the front steps, stubborn and green despite the cold. The same wind chime hung above the porch, a tinny little thing that had somehow survived 4 harsh winters and maybe even more than that. I didn't need to knock. I never did. She opened the door and pulled me in like no time had passed. That was her way. A warm hug, soft smile, no interrogation. Just quiet acceptance. Like she saw everything without needing the details. Inside, it smelled like onions, thyme, and slow-cooked comfort. We sat at her kitchen table, the one with the uneven leg and a faded floral tablecloth that had seen years of meals and moments. She ladled out her beef stew into chipped bowls, the same ones we'd eaten from since I was a kid. We didn't talk much at first. She didn't ask what happened, didn't press me to explain. She didn't need to. Halfway through our second bowl, she reached across the table and placed her hand gently on mine. Her eyes didn't search mine. They settled into them. "You fought smart," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "But I hope you'll let go just as smart." I didn't respond. Not because I didn't agree, but because some truths don't need to be echoed. She gave my hand a little squeeze before pulling back. "You came out of this more you than before." That one hit different. It landed somewhere beneath the armor I hadn't realized I was still wearing. My throat tightened, not from grief or anger, but from something quieter. Release, maybe. The kind of emotion that doesn't demand attention but simply arrives. Later, we stood side by side at the sink, washing dishes like we used to. The routine felt grounding, familiar. She handed me a rinsed plate and said casually, "You going back to the firm?" I shook my head slowly. "I don't think so. I want to build something smaller, something that feels like mine." She just nodded, like she'd already made peace with the answer before I even gave it. The drive home was quiet, no music, no podcast, just the hum of tires on pavement and the occasional whisper of wind through the vents. When my phone buzzed, I hesitated. Finally, I pulled over and checked the message. "Noelle, you heard what happened to Jerome?" I stared at the screen. My thumb hovered, then tapped to reveal the rest. "Noelle, he got dropped from both advisory boards. Something leaked. The clause in his contract kicked in. Reputation risk." There was a pause. Another buzz. "Noelle, also, Rochelle moved to Florida. She's working with some dating coach influencer now. Swear to God it's real. You can't make this up." I didn't laugh. There was no satisfaction in it. No victory lap. Just silence. I'd learned something. You can't keep breaking people and expect to stay whole. You leave enough wreckage behind, eventually you end up walking on shards. That wasn't karma, it wasn't revenge. It was physics, cause and effect. The next morning, I brewed my coffee slowly. Didn't check my phone, didn't scroll. I stood by the window and watched Seattle stretch awake under a cloudy sky. The city had its own rhythm. Buses pulling up, joggers hustling past puddles, the occasional dog walker in a raincoat. Nothing extraordinary, But it felt good to watch something that wasn't about me. There was no anxiety in the air, no mental tallying of who might betray me next, no scanning for landmines. For once, I was just there. Fully, quietly. That week, I started rebuilding, not just my career, but the framework of my everyday life. I cleared out my closet and gave away clothes I hadn't worn in a year. I replaced the old framed wedding photo with a clean, minimalist travel map. Marked a hiking trail in Oregon I'd always meant to try. Rearranged the furniture in my apartment just slightly, but enough to feel new. One evening, I opened my laptop and made a new folder. The name came to me immediately. My story, not his version. I clicked into a blank document. The cursor blinked, waiting. Then, slowly, I began to type. I almost became someone else to survive him. But this is who I am, without him. The words weren't hard. They just came slowly because I wanted to mean everyone. They didn't come from the pain anymore. They came from clarity, from ownership. Maybe someday I'd fall in love again. I didn't rule it out. But that wasn't the finish line. That wasn't the goal. Freedom was. And now, I understood something I hadn't before. When freedom is enough, love doesn't cost you anything you can't afford to lose. That night, I curled up on the couch with a blanket and a mug of tea. Alexa played some old jazz quietly in the background. Nothing cinematic, just gentle sound to fill the room. The city lights shimmered through the windows like tiny stars. Not asking for anything, just reminding me they were there. My phone buzzed once, then silence. I didn't reach for it. Instead, I let the quiet settle around me. And I thought about forgiveness. Not the glossy, overused version. Not the kind that lets bad people off the hook. The real kind. The kind that sets you free. Forgiveness, I realized, wasn't about them. It was about me. It was about loosening the grip on old survival instincts. Letting go of the leash I'd tied around my own neck. I smiled. Not because I had everything figured out. Not because I was healed. But because I hadn't shattered. I'd bent. I'd splintered in places. But I was still here. And that counted for something. Maybe even everything. And I knew now. I didn't just survive him. I survived the parts of myself that thought I needed him. That's how I know I'm free. Before you go, if there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that silence is never the same as peace. For a long time, I stayed quiet to keep the peace, to avoid conflict, to preserve what I thought was love. But silence can become a cage. And when someone you trust begins to build that cage around you with lies, charm, and manipulation, it's not love, it's control. If you're watching this, and you're in a place where something feels off, trust that voice in your gut. That whisper, that discomfort, it's wisdom. You don't need permission to protect yourself. You don't have to break to rebuild. You can move early, you can move smart, and you can move with dignity. I didn't win because I screamed louder. I won because I stopped trying to fix what was never mine to fix, and started fighting for me. What about you? Have you ever stayed in something too long just because it felt safer than starting over? What would you tell your past self if you could go back 5 years? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one. If this story hit home for you, drop a, or tell me where you're watching from. And hey, if you didn't like it, I still want to know why. What would have made it better? Let's talk. Let's grow. Let's heal. Together. And if you want to hear more real stories like this, of strength, survival, and starting again, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what's next. Thanks for listening.